Well, hello there. It is great to see you, and welcome back to another installment of the Impact Report. I'm your host and moderator, Ryan Ruff of the Celebrity Branding Agency, and we've got President and CEO, Mr. Eric Lawton of Impact Financial. He'll be joining us momentarily. He is the star of our show, after all. Look, and we're going to be together, as you know, for another wealth management related discussion today here on the show. If you were able to join us for our last episode, you know that Eric and I took a deep dive into this idea of the family constitution. Eric works with a lot of wealthy, successful families over at Impact Financial, has a lot of these types of conversations, regarding family wealth as a whole, how it matriculates down, and so on and so forth. What we covered in that episode, just this idea of a framework, with guidelines and principles on how a family can truly align themselves when it comes to the goals and the aspirations of their wealth. So if that sounds like something that interests you, maybe I would recommend traveling back, checking out our prior episode, bringing yourself up to speed on that topic, because today's topic really plays nicely with that same conversation. We're sticking with this idea of family wealth as a whole. Today's topic: preparing heirs for their inheritances. Really, what we're trying to get you, our audience, to think about is, are your heirs ready or prepared to one day inherit the wealth that is coming? So, with that being said, let's go ahead and bring Eric on to get right into today's conversation. Eric, good to see you. Welcome aboard today.
Great to see you, Ryan. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on the show to kind of walk us through this conversation, throw you some questions today. So, Eric, yes, let's start talking a little bit about the just inheritances as a whole today. Typically we think of them as, somebody obtains a large chunk of money and their life is changed overnight. Well, that sure, that can be the case, but you believe, Eric, that inheritances can also be a little bit of a double-edged sword. Why would you say that's the case?
That's right. Yeah, inheriting money comes with plenty of benefits, of course, from being less worried about paying for life's necessities to enjoying the advantages of affluence. Maybe spending more on luxury goods or affording a top tier education for the kids and so on. Inheritors often find that some of life's key stumbling blocks are no longer in their paths. But that being said, an inheritance, even a huge one, doesn't automatically mean a worry free life of ease. The reality is that inheriting wealth can create unique challenges, and it could be conflicts, and they could be internal or external. A windfall could be the root of significant problems for your heirs, and therefore for you too.
Yeah, Eric. So I hear you say this idea of internal and external conflicts, and that's kind of at the root of the conversation, I feel like, today. Why don't you dive into a little bit of what you mean by these internal and external conflicts? What are we talking about here?
Well, inheriting a sizable fortune can be confusing to some inheritors. Very often, significant wealth goes hand in hand with status and power, which sometimes leads to heirs abusing their position. For example, they can become narcissistic or bully, using their wealth as a justification for cruel or boorish behavior. But then some inheritors feel trapped or isolated. They feel the money has set them apart and they have difficulties building trust and dealing with other people. Often inheritors who think they don't deserve the money end up feeling guilty. They ask themselves, well, why me? And feel the family money is an anchor holding them down. So there can be a lot of emotional or psychological hurdles that make an inheritance anything but easy and fun.
So, given these, the fact that it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, you've got these internal and external conflicts going on, Eric, what would you say somebody should be doing to start addressing this and ultimately helping the heirs that are going to inherit, a sizable income one day?
Sure. One of our big beliefs is that it's often helpful to start by looking at how some of the wealthiest, most successful families address key financial matters and challenges. Right? We find that these affluent families, and we're talking about net worths of $500 million or more, just tend to take the right steps and implement smart plans, especially in regards to how their heirs access and manage inherited wealth. So looking at them as a model for guidance makes a lot of sense, right? Their strategies
Mhm.
can give potentially, more information for our own action plan, regardless of whether, you're the one giving the money or receiving it.
Sure, it's a matter of looking at what the most successful people do and trying to model some of those behaviors. It's like, hey, if you want to be a great quarterback, you look at what the NFL quarterbacks are doing these days. Same
Right.
sort of thing. So then in that case, Eric, when you're looking at these successful families, what do you see that they're doing, or maybe even not doing, when it comes to educating their heirs and preparing them for that inheritance?
In our experience, we find that the most wealth creators, they want to pass the results of their hard work and commitment to their children and other loved ones. So they focus on financial matters. The aim here is to be tax efficient in transferring the wealth. For instance, there are different tax strategies that can be employed to mitigate intergenerational loss of family wealth, a concern of many. This aspect of transferring the family wealth is most straightforward for most wealthy families, but that's all you're focused on, you might be missing a key piece of the puzzle. The second consideration is striving to ensure heirs will do smart things about their money. And this is where we see most successful families really differentiating themselves in terms of how they view wealth and inheritances. A major concern of affluent wealth creators is that inheritors will misuse the wealth that they're given. They believe rightly, in our opinion, that being given control over a large amount of money and being able to make wise decisions don't always go hand in hand. But,
Mhm.
you know, this is important. It's just not those affluent wealth creators who are concerned about the ability of their heirs to manage their inheritances. It's often also the heirs themselves. It can be easy for inheritors to mismanage their fortunes, and we find that many inheritors recognize that. That means heirs need to be well prepared for the day when they receive their inheritances.
Yeah, yeah, Eric. So in that case, where do you begin to like foster that level of financial intelligence among your heirs that are going to one day inherit that? How do you start this problem? Where do you begin?
Right. You have to start with the present. A good
Mhm.
starting point for understanding how inheriting wealth might affect heirs' lives is seeing how the money is impacting them today. When they get to their teens, the majority of inheritors, have some idea that they have wealth, right? And today, attempts by parents to hide or downplay their affluence, it's just not realistic. So heirs should consider these answers to questions such as: is wealth a source of terrific possibilities, a source of horrific problems, or some combination of the two? How is money affecting your life? Is wealth the cause of serious relationship problems? And if so, what and with whom are they? And to what extent do you define yourself by your family money? What would happen if the money vanished? In addition, parents should assess the ability of their children to manage their inheritances. If children are not up to the job, what steps need to be taken to seek to ensure they're capable and will not waste their inheritances?
Right, right. So it sounds to me, Eric, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it sounds to me like it's once you get a good idea of your the heirs' current views on wealth, how they handle it themselves, how they view maybe the family wealth as a whole, that can then inform you for future action and future steps to take to educate the heirs, because maybe you can tailor the game plan a little differently. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, yes. Chances
Okay.
are you'll find there's a range among heirs in terms of their ability to
Mhm.
intelligently and prudently handle significant wealth. And that means different heirs will probably need different approaches to wealth education in order to best handle their inheritances. It can be detrimental to hand over control of assets without taking these major factors into account. I'm sure it won't surprise you to hear that there are many different ideas about how to best teach heirs to manage money. A lot of professionals focus on educating heirs about wealth management, teaching them fundamentals such as the difference between stocks and bonds, as well as methodologies such as asset allocation. The lessons also tend to deal with different possible estate planning strategies, including how trusts work. But we see a fundamental problem with this. This approach is generally appealing to those inheritors who want to handle the mechanics of wealth management. However, we find that most inheritors are really not interested in these types of details.
Yeah, yeah, I know that's a good point. I mean, like you just said, it sounds like it can be detrimental in instances like that where assets are handed over to those that don't necessarily care about it. So let me ask you this then, Eric. If you're dealing with somebody like that who doesn't necessarily care or have that gut, motivation to really take this and propel it forward, do you find that maybe there's an approach to educating heirs that might just be more appealing overall and that could resonate with them and then obviously lead to a little bit better of an outcome? Is there a particular approach you guys use?
Yes, an approach we find to be much more effective across all types of inheritors is to focus on how to be responsible for their wealth. This
Hmm.
means giving them a good understanding of a bigger picture by knowing what they want to pursue financially and being attuned to what is going on with their money. They can make more informed decisions. Even if the assets are in a trust, heirs can be best served if they understand how the trusts have been set up and what they're designed to accomplish. That way, heirs can better understand what's going on in the trust and what it's supposed to be happening. A second key aspect of teaching heirs to be responsible for the wealth is giving them the ability to effectively select and work with professionals such as lawyers, accountants, and wealth managers. Now, part of that means empowering heirs to know how to avoid what we call pretenders. These are professionals who may want to do good for them, but lack the requisite skills. And pretenders can be detrimental to heirs' financial well being.
Hmm.
More problematic, especially if heirs receive significant sums, is the possibility of being exploited by predators, grifters, and the like. Significant wealth is a magnet for all manner of professional predators. So, having the skills to identify such people before they do harm is really necessary for most inheritors and when they really
Yeah.
appreciate having.
Sure. No, I mean, that makes all the sense in the world. So, Eric, let me ask this then. Is there anything else that maybe a family matriarch or patriarch should be on the lookout for or be thinking about when it comes to just this overall concept of preparing heirs for their inheritance?
Another big area where inheritor education efforts can help is how inheritors potentially can use their money to better the lives of others. This is a
Mm.
part of the stewardship of inheritance, and it may involve a deep discussion of values and the importance of using wealth to have a positive impact in the community or on the world at large. Discussions about philanthropy and causes of importance to the family get the ball rolling here. Additionally, there may be a need to discuss issues of money and self esteem, as new wealth can produce feelings of anxiety, sometimes even worthlessness among some inheritors. This is often seen when inheritors' self worth is too tied to their wealth, which fuels an intense fear of losing wealth and therefore losing self esteem. Delving into ideas that help separate people's wealth from their overall sense of self can really help foster a more comfortable relationship between an inheritor and his or her inheritance.
Sure, that makes sense to me, Eric. And one thing I do want to kind of clarify for our audience is while we mentioned at the beginning of the episode, Eric, is this idea of looking at the super rich or the super affluent, taking pages out of their playbook, applying it to ours. This idea of preparing heirs for their inheritance. You don't necessarily need to be inheriting massive sums of money or assets for these types of educational efforts to still be pertinent and still be helpful to the children, right? This is a universally applicable strategy of preparing heirs to for their inheritance. Am I correct in saying that?
Of course, the key
Mhm.
is to getting going well before the day comes when assets are
Right.
transferred. You want to encourage heirs to think about their views, values, attitudes towards money and wealth, and how these might change their bottom line suddenly had addition if they had additional zeros. In particular, help them understand some financial basics and smart ways to size up any professionals that they may encounter down the road. Armed with self awareness and a strong foundation of financial knowledge, your heirs potentially can get the most of their inheritance.
Roger that. And Eric, we've thrown a lot of information at our audience today, just in some tips, some strategies on how to go about this process. Uh, who should you say then that families who are looking for help with educating theirs, who should they turn to start this conversation to get that ball rolling so that they are ahead of the game?
I would say the first and probably the best resource is your current wealth manager, especially if
Mhm.
your children already know him or her and see that he or she is a trusted advisor to the family. And from there, it may depend on specific issues that the family wants to address. For example, maybe the wealth manager enlists an expert in financial psychology to help the family deal with issues around wealth, meaning, and self worth. Or perhaps, philanthropy focused professionals are brought in to discuss concepts around doing well by doing good. The really good news is that there are so many resources out there, who can help families.
That's great to hear, Eric. And as we bring our conversation to a head here on the show today, my final question for you. Let's say this conversation out there, it's resonating with some of our audience members out there, and they are maybe interested in touching base with Impact Financial, you or somebody on your team to maybe keep the conversation rolling, talk about how it applies to their specific situation, maybe get some of these tips and strategies on a more granular level for their situation. How would you say is the best method they get in touch with you or your team to start that conversation?
Sure. The best thing to do is shoot us an email, Eric, ERIC, at impactyourgoals.com. They can go to our website and peruse the website, see if there's any other information they want to discuss as well. And we'll be happy to point them in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, Eric, look, hey, I appreciate you carving some time out of your busy day to be with us on the show here this morning, and shed some light on this idea of preparing heirs for the inheritance. I have a feeling we're going to be revisiting family wealth and the various dynamics that surround it in future episodes to come. But I think today was a really good one. So thanks for being with us.
Take care. Thanks, Ryan.
All righty. And look, hey, we want to take one final moment, as always, to thank you, our audience, right, for jumping aboard and being with us on the show here. If you enjoyed today's conversation, you took anything away from it, do us a favor, subscribe to the show on whichever platform you're checking us out on. Maybe leave a comment or a question. And then, of course, share this information with friends, family, business owners, anybody that you think would benefit from the types of conversations that Eric and I are having here on the Impact Report. Because at the end of the day, these strategies, these solutions, these conversations that we're having, they're meant for you, right? This is the Impact Report. We want to provide beneficial information at the end of the day. So for Mr. Eric Lawton of Impact Financial, I'm Ryan Ruff of the Celebrity Branding Agency. We want to thank you so much for once again joining us here on today's edition of the Impact Report.